Business. I'm your host, Nicole Murray, and today we'll discover how some businesses are coping with our constantly changing world of technology and how they've chosen to embrace it. So be sure to grab a pen and paper or even an iPad. But first, let's take a look at what's ahead. During the show, we'll take a look behind the scenes of both a newspaper company and an independent music business to discover the impacts of technology firsthand. We'll also find out what the public had to say about technology and take a look at some different gadgets businesses can use to help adjust to this change. Well, as you can see, there's a big show ahead. So to kick things off, in the studio with us today is Ryan Williams, who's the account manager of the NBN, to talk to us about the revolution in technology that's about to change our lives. Hi Ryan, welcome.
Thanks Nicole.
Thanks for joining us. So Ryan, for those that don't know, what exactly is the National Broadband Network?
So the National Broadband Network, or more commonly NBN, is a once-in-a-generation change to our national telecommunications infrastructure. We'll be providing 100% of Australians, regardless of where they live, with high-speed access to broadband. And importantly, we're a wholesale-only open access network, which means that all telecommunications carriers, regardless of big or small, will be competing over the same network, which is good news for us as consumers.
Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it? Especially for remote areas and things
Absolutely.
like that. So, I mean, I've got the internet at home and that's fine for my needs, the speed at the moment, but obviously technology changes and you need faster access. So how fast is it actually going to be?
So our entry-level wholesale speed that we're offering to internet service providers is 12 megabits per second. For those who will be able to access the NBN on the fibre technology, we're actually offering up to 100 megabits per second.
Wow.
And I think it's important to remember that while you have good access to good speeds where you are currently, not everyone has the same access, and there's actually still 500,000 Australians on a dial-up connection.
Wow, 500,000. That's, realise that's a lot, isn't it? Yeah. So, okay, in terms of businesses, how is that going to benefit business?
Because what we're doing is essentially levelling the playing field of access to reliable broadband. What that means is that is also levelling the playing field for business. So that means that small to medium enterprises will be able to compete with big business, regional business can compete with city business, and also open up new markets that a lot of businesses have never been able to explore before, not just locally or nationally, but potentially globally.
Wow, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And I know a lot of businesses, you know, they want to put video, say, on their websites and things like that, and YouTube's obviously a very big search engine. It's supposed to, you know, Google these days. And so how does that impact them then, you know, being able to have that fast access?
Well, there's a lot of things like video-rich content that all businesses will be able to do, again, regardless of whether you're in a metropolitan or a regional area. The other thing that it will allow access to is things like cloud computing, so businesses can reduce their costs for things like hardware, like servers. They can all do it on the cloud, as we call it now. Also implementing things like telework policy, so regional businesses can attract and retain the best staff and they don't have to necessarily be located in that particular area.
Wow, so that's incredible changes, and obviously education and health and all that sort of thing would be affected as well. Absolutely,
and some of the biggest benefiters, particularly for, again, regional and rural areas, are the changes to the way we'll deliver health services, the way we'll deliver education services and businesses service and products. So by levelling the playing field, it's essentially allowing metropolitan type access to people everywhere, regardless of where they live.
Yeah, and so how will the service actually roll out?
So with the fibre rollout, we've actually got a 10-year rollout plan. So you'll start to see over the next coming months areas of, say, Aspley, Goodna and Toowoomba starting to get activated. If you log on to nbnco.com.au, there's actually a search engine where you can type in your address and you can see where you fit into the rollout.
Yeah, all right. And so how does it get delivered then?
So there's 3 different technologies. So our objective is to provide 93% of schools, businesses and homes with fibre optic connections straight to your door. The next 7% will be serviced with a mix of next generation fixed wireless or satellite technology.
Wow, there's a lot of changes going on, and for the future, what do you see?
I think what we'll see is once we've levelled the playing field is that we get access regardless of where you live. It's not about where you live anymore, it's about what you do, and there'll be huge changes to business models and to supply chain models. We've actually just released our small business product suite, which will allow internet service providers to provide enhanced services and business grade services over the NBN.
Wow, sounds exciting, doesn't it?
It's a really exciting time.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I really appreciate you coming in today.
No worries, my pleasure.
Well, now let's see what's coming up after the break. After the break, we'll visit Queensland Times to uncover how people are really buying their newspapers today. Is it online, on their smartphones, or do people still prefer to buy the hard copy paper? Well, welcome back to Good Business. Well, newspapers have certainly seen a great revolution through technology advancements, but how do people get their newspapers? Is it online, on their iPads or smartphones, or do people still prefer the tangible experience of purchasing and reading a hard copy newspaper? To find out more about this, Ashley Jones went on location to the Queensland Times in Ipswich and spoke to the editor, Stuart Sherwin.
Newspapers have undergone tremendous changes over the years, from broadsheet to the more familiar tabloid that we see today. But of course, not only in that format, but online as well. To find out more about what's happening in the newspaper world, Editor-in-Chief of the Queensland Times, Stuart Sherwin, joins me. Stuart, how has technology impacted on newspapers?
In the last 2 decades, there's basically been a revolution in newspapers and how they're produced. Go back 20 years or even longer than that, it's an extremely labour-intensive, very old world sort of technology. But the introduction of sort of digitalisation has just changed the industry beyond recognition. And really, if it hadn't changed, there's no way, I find it hard to imagine it would still be as profitable as it is today, because as a result of a lot of the changes that came through, we were able to make massive reductions in the sort of workforce and the costs involved in the actual composition of newspapers and actually how they're produced on the print as well. It's almost affected every single stage of the newspaper production. We still use pens and notepads and what have you when we go out, but that's probably the only thing that's still done in the same way that it was done 20 years ago. And what we see today is, the increasing growth and importance of online journalism, and virtually every newspaper in Australia now has an associated website, which is becoming more and more important as the industry progresses.
Well, certainly, obviously, the website is very important to any business, but with the newspaper, how important is it for you to be able to get to communicate with the public?
There's some very sort of interesting statistics. I think about 75% of people who go onto newspaper websites are still actually consumers of newspapers in one guise or another. So the idea that everybody, which is the perception that people in the industry often have, is that everybody who goes onto our news websites is a Generation Y person who never looks at a newspaper, is actually completely untrue, really. There's still a very strong newspaper habit amongst online readers, and you'd expect that because the people who consume our news are the people in print form, are people who are passionate and care about what's going on in their community, and they're the same sort of characteristics that you see in people who would be accessing our news, whether it's online or whether in the newspaper. So the audience is actually it's different, but there's a very big crossover between the two.
So Stuart, do you see a time coming when the Queensland Times will not only be available as a physical product but also available in its entirety online?
Actually, in the very near future, we're going to make the newspaper pages accessible online for a subscription fee, so people will actually be able to look at their desk and look at the traditional print version of the newspaper. And a large quantity of the newspaper is already put up online. I think probably what we're going to see in the next year or two, especially with the QT, is that we're going to be not putting up everything that goes on the newspaper. We're putting up a lot more breaking news and things that happen within the community on a day-to-day basis. You will actually get more news on your website than will actually be provided in the newspaper. I think the long-term aim is that the newspaper is more about analysis and comment on things that are going on in the community, and that the internet is a place where stories are actually, traditional news stories are broken to people first.
So where do you see then the future for the Queensland Times and newspapers in general?
It's pretty hard to call, to be honest. It's pretty difficult to see what's going to be happening in 2 or 3 years' time in the newspaper industry, let alone 10 years. There's been a lot of sort of doom and gloom about print media in general in the last few years, and Fairfax and News Limited are both cutting jobs. But if you look at the statistics, still 8 out of 10 people will read a newspaper, whether it's a free newspaper or daily newspaper or metropolitan newspaper. 8 out of 10 people will read a newspaper at least once a week. So the print media, although we're sort of a bit down on ourselves at the moment, we're still reaching 80% of the population one way or another. That's got to be the basis for a pretty successful industry. I don't think we're going away anytime soon.
And in many ways, you're really about reinventing yourself.
Constantly, yeah. I mean, newspapers in a way are a reflection of society. We have to sort of reflect what people are interested in, what their needs are, what information they want. And society is always changing at extremely rapid rate, so we don't always keep up as much as we should do, but we certainly try to do that and evolve over time.
Well, thanks, Stuart. And we thought we'd go to the streets to find out what you had to say. Do you buy the newspaper as a physical product or see it online? Here's what you had to say.
I read the paper on my mobile because, I'm always on the run, very busy person.
I just read it off the iPad. I just like to pull it out wherever and read it whenever.
I prefer to read the paper catching the train home.
I've been at McDonald's on the way to work to get a drink, and I steal their paper on the way out and take it to work and read it at work.
It's just as fast to flick through I think it's actually faster than on screen because you can browse quicker.
Well, that's what you had to say about the way you read the newspaper. Well, online resources are becoming more commonplace. To discuss more about the online aspect, we're joined by Dr. Karen Coatney, journalism lecturer at USQ. Hi, Karen. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Nicole. It's good to meet you.
So, Karen, you've had over 20 years' experience in print, broadcast and online media. What sort of changes have you seen over that time?
Yes, there have been a lot of changes. That I was working as a journalist in Boston for an international media organisation that had a daily newspaper that won Pulitzer Prizes for international reporting. And over the past 5 years, it's gone completely online to 24-hour news. So there are a lot of opportunities now for business leaders and community leaders to interact with media audiences, to respond to their concerns and ideas, and also opportunities to be honest and open with media audiences through online media. But also I believe it's important not to overlook professional journalists and the need to develop positive, friendly, professional relationships with journalists too.
Yeah, so have that interaction as well as the online component.
Exactly, yes.
So how do you see businesses adapting to this change in technology?
Yes, they've been adapting really well. That there are very sophisticated businesses that are using social media to interact with specialised niche audiences, as well as using online media to be very inclusive and open with their audiences. That the most effective leaders are those who have mastered the fine art of communicating and are able to communicate a clear and consistent corporate vision. So being very inclusive to online audiences, because it's important not to exclude any type of audience. So the most effective leaders are those who really know how to communicate a shared vision and values with media audiences.
Yes, there's a lot to take in, isn't it, for all the changes in technology. But we read blogs online, we get RSS feeds coming through and other online news resources as well. Why do you think there's such a high demand for this online content?
Well, it's more convenient, of course, to go online for news. I think it's important to remember that Australian audiences have always been highly literate, and there's always been a huge demand for news, which is great and part of a democracy, that Australian media audiences, if they don't like something that they've seen in a newspaper, that they're quite happy to write a letter to the editor and interact with editors. So there's always been that interactive component. But it's also important to have professional journalists to deliver credible news online as well, because they're the ones who can make it easily understood to audiences too.
To audiences, yeah. And so for people, we're getting the social media and we're getting all the different types of online content, and it's great to interact with that and put comments and forums and things like that. But do you still feel that there's a need for people to have the hard copy newspaper? Do you think that'll still be around for a while?
Yes, it seems like the news is going increasingly online, which there are still great opportunities for journalists to transfer their skills online. But I believe that newspapers have found that they've been successful still and have prospered if they are really local and relevant to their readers and to their newspaper readers. So by making the news very relevant to those newspaper readers and really making it local, that seems to have helped those newspapers who have survived in the online environment. That hasn't really been filled by online media. We don't see so much of the local news. So that's still something that newspaper editors have found have helped them to survive.
And what do you see is, say, the future for online newspapers then?
Yes, it's exciting to think about the future, isn't it? That there have been so many changes with the news that technology is certainly making it easier for us to communicate to audiences, which is so important. It's also important to remember to stay connected with media audiences, no matter what the technology, and also to remember those important relationships with professional journalists, that business leaders who do well are those who have developed professional friendly relationships with journalists.
Yeah, so it's online and offline, and they've still got to, create that content and that connection.
I believe so. It's good to have the range of media.
Yeah, okay. Yes. All right, Karen, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you. Well, newspapers are just one area in which technology has impacted, but here's another. Well, coming up after the break, we'll discover how technology is affecting the music business, and we'll look at some different gadgets that businesses can use to embrace this change in technology. Well, welcome back to Good Business, where we're taking a look at how some businesses are not only coping with this changing technology, but also the ways in which they have embraced it. Well, joining us today is Pat Byrne, Product Specialist for Video Pro, to do a bit of show and tell of the latest gadgets out at the moment. Hi Pat, thanks for joining us.
No problem at all.
So Pat, what have we got here? A rather large gadget?
Yes, we have the InFocus Mondo Pad. Essentially, it's a 55-inch full high definition panel with a multi-touch overlay. Up the top, you've got a 720p camera, and down the bottom, you've got a 50-watt soundbar, which is optimized for voice. What you don't see on the back, there is actually a computer inbuilt, which has Windows 7 Pro, Microsoft Office 2010, and you can see that it's just turning it into one big touch panel, essentially.
Okay, so how does this work for businesses then?
For businesses, it's essentially one big collaboration tool. You have a whiteboard that can be written on.
Oh, that's good.
Well, you also have, I need to work on my handwriting a little bit.
Yeah.
You also have video conferencing, which is inbuilt. So you can actually call people that are out of the office, and you can connect people no matter where they are.
Yeah, and do they use the existing microphone that's inbuilt on that?
Yep, so there's a 4 microphone array up the top, which enables video conferencing. So this is, we've called Ivan back in the office. Even when we're talking to Ivan, we can actually go back onto the whiteboard, and you can see that Ivan's still there, and we've got him up on the screen that we can still annotate, and he can view our annotations.
So he can see that as well, so
yes.
whatever you're doing on the whiteboard. And what other features has it got then?
Thanks, Ivan. So other features that we have, we also have the ability to load and share any sort of presentation. So you can see at the moment there's a whole range of presentations here where you can just click on them, and they will actually bring that presentation up onto the screen. Then we can use all those annotation functions as well to actually go through and annotate over the top of the presentation. All of your annotations you can actually share quite easily via email. So you can see just by clicking that there, you can type in the email address, and it sends that file out as a JPEG. So it's quite a common file
So
type.
it's sort of like screen captures and then sends that through exactly how you've written on it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so you can use Word and Excel for this, and PowerPoint?
Yes, so it comes with all of those different documents. Those different programs. So we can actually go along, and you can see we've added some other programs in here. We could bring up an Excel document, and then because it runs on a Windows 7 platform, it's also multi-touch enabled. So you can see that we can actually zoom in and out, and then we can actually use the annotation tools which are built in to Excel there as well.
So you can circle all the graphs and what have you on there. That's amazing. And so have businesses started to embrace this, or is it so new that it hasn't really?
It's only been around in Australia for about 4 months now, but it is starting to get out there, and it's a lot easier to use than the older interactive whiteboards, which have been on the market for quite some time now.
In terms of just the touch display, or?
Yes, I guess it takes a little bit of getting used to with an interactive whiteboard. This one just seems to be a lot easier because the computer is inbuilt, and therefore you don't need to connect any sort of cables. You can literally just touch the screen, it turns it on, and you're ready to go.
So does it have like a USB outlet? That's where you put your documents in? Or?
There are 4 USB inputs off to the side here. As well as that, you have a VGA or HDMI, which you can automatically connect any other external computer and it will automatically flick up onto the screen. As well as that, you don't need to install any software, and it turns that additional laptop or computer into a giant tablet up here on the screen.
Wow.
So it turns your computer into an iPad on steroids.
An iPad on steroids, that's amazing. Wow, thanks so much, Pat, for that. We really appreciate you coming in and showing us all that, and hopefully businesses will embrace that soon.
No problem at all.
Well, it's time now to look at how one music business has embraced the technology revolution. But before we do, I hit the streets to find out how you get your music. Let's take a look.
I prefer to buy it online.
I get mine from Sanity so I can support the bands I like.
From either iTunes, illegally, or from friends.
I buy a hard copy, CD.
I get mine from iTunes because it's so much easier.
Well, it's interesting to see how people get their recorded music these days. But what about people wanting to buy a musical instrument? Where do they go? Well, the answer may seem simple, but do people actually want to go in-store to purchase their product, or are they happy to browse online? Well, to answer that question, I have with me Craig Claxton from Guitar Brothers at Red Hill in Brisbane. Hi, Craig.
Hi, Nicole.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, thank you.
Now, Craig, you've had over 20 years' experience in the music business. So what changes have you seen over time?
We've seen a lot of changes in the way people are shopping. The retail environment has never been more challenging. We have an online presence with our own website. We also sell things on eBay. We're involved with social media, predominantly Facebook, and we feel that multifaceted approach is essential if we want to stay ahead of our competition.
So you've got to keep up with the trends, obviously.
It's changing every day.
So you are a businessman, so tell us a bit about the business you've got here.
Guitar Brothers is a boutique store. We felt there was a need in the marketplace for someone who specialised in guitars. So we're not a full line shop. We don't do drums, brass, woodwind, keyboards and all the other musical instruments. We specialise in guitars and ukuleles and mandolins and things like that. But we offer everything from beginner level, entry level instruments through to some of the finest instruments, vintage instruments that you can find on the market.
So the whole kit and caboodle.
Absolutely.
Now, you might hear some noises in the background. We've got customers coming through and things like that. Yes. But in terms of your business, how has technology affected it? Has it been a positive thing or a negative thing for you?
Look, I think it certainly has affected the business. You have to be prepared to adapt. We are now selling far more online than we ever did in the past. People, I think, are becoming more used to purchasing online. However, guitars being such a tactile thing, things that you want to hold, feel, listen to, play, still the bulk of our sales in that area are people walking into the shop and trying them out. However, things that I call them coloured boxes, so things like effects pedals, drum machines, things that come in boxes. We sell a lot of those online. We sell every day. We do sell guitars and basses and things online. However, the bulk of those are still people coming into the shop.
Is that because they want to get that feel? And
I think so. I think the fact that every guitar is different, people like, especially if you're handing over a lot of money for it, you want to hear it and feel it and know that it's the guitar for you.
So that's like the difference for you as to how you can compete with technologies, that people still want that tactile experience with guitars.
I think so, yeah.
So Craig, what do you offer here that technology can't compete with?
Look, I think it's what you make of it. We are selling more online than we ever had, as I mentioned. I think you can't afford to ignore it. However, it's challenging times at the moment with the high Australian dollar. We seem to be working very hard for less margin. But it's you have to do what you have to do to keep the wheels turning.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today, Craig, but thank you so much for sharing with us your business insights and how you've adapted to technology.
My pleasure.
So if you get the chance, then please pop up and see Craig at Guitar Brothers here at Red Hill in Brisbane. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show today, so remember to tune in next time for another exciting episode of Good Business. Right now, I'm off with Craig to learn some tunes. Bye for now.